Hello everyone. So today's video is about ratios and proportions. We'll talk a little bit about how to solve ratios and proportions, what they are, and how we'll see some questions in the SAT related to this. So the first thing that I'll talk about is what ratios really are. They're an ordered pair of numbers. Let's say A and B are my numbers, then a ratio can be written as A over B. It's different from proportions because proportions they have it's proportion is an equation. So we have two ratios which are set equal to each other in a proportion. So for example, a proportion can be something like this: A over B equals C over D. That's the major difference. Just to give a fair idea, let's say we have a classroom, we have one girl for every two boys in the class. So if we have um, 10 girls, then that means the class has 20 boys and there is a total of 30 students. So that can be written in this form where let's say we have one girl for every two boys, and if the class has a total of 20 boys, then that automatically tells me that the number of girls in this class is 10. So that's what we'll be using proportions for, and these are some very common questions in the SAT where they'll ask you that, hey, there's a classroom, we have these many boys, these many girls, this is the ratio, find out one of the numbers. They can also ask you questions like, let's say, uh, I have a total of 30 students in the class, the ratio of boys to girls is 1 to 2. How many boys do we have and how many girls do we have? So in this case, we know that the ratio is 1 to 2. That means we're comparing it with 3 students in total. So there is a factor of 10 in there, which means the 1 to 2 ratio can be multiplied with a factor of 10 and it becomes 10 to 20. So that's just a basic definition of what ratios are and what proportions are. Um, Another example I can quickly give you is, let's say I have a question like 3 over 5 equals something over 20. This is a proportion, um, and in this case it's only a proportion when the x is equal to 12, because 12 over 20 can be simplified to 3 over 5. In all of these questions, especially the word problems, one suggestion is that you keep the same units on the same sides. So what I mean by that is, in that previous example of boys over girls ratio, let's say I had one girl for every two boys. If the question tells me that I have 20 boys, then I'll write that 20 right across the equal to sign, but in the denominator again, because the boys is in the denominator on the left side. That same thing applies on the right side. So make sure that you have the same units across each other in the equal to sign. And then this would be x girls. All right, with that said, that's again a very simple introduction to what ratios and proportions are. But at this point, we'll just focus a little bit on some of the questions that we'll expect to see in the SAT. So, for the first example, let's say I have, and again, these are coming in from the official SAT study guide. So, we have 240 adults and children. So in this case, we have a total of 240. They're telling us that the ratio of adults to children, and again, when they write the ratio of adults to children is 5 to 1, the way I would like to write it is adults over children is 5 to 1. Now that tells me that there is a total of 6 here. 5 and 1 makes the total of 6. So there is a factor of 6 here. So what I'll say is that, let's say the total 6 times x, because we don't know what the factor is 240, which means x is 40. So they're using a factor of 40 here. When they're using a factor of 40, that tells me that there were 5 times 40, or 200 adults, and 1 times 40, or 40 children. So it's as simple as that. They have given us the number of adults and children. They've given us a ratio of adults to children. And from that, I can find out how many adults went into the show and how many children went into the show. Another example, let's just think of it this way. I have a diagram, a drawing with me for a house. And say 1 inch represents 3 feet on the diagram. Now I'm given a floor plan, and it says that this particular rectangle has 3.5 inches of length versus 3 inches of width. Actually, let's make it 5 here. So all we have to do is find the area of the room in terms of square feet. So I can do it two ways. Now, first I can either convert both length and width into feet, or I can just multiply it and then convert it into feet later on. I'll do it the first way. Let's just convert all the 3.5 inches and 5 inches into feet first. So this becomes 10.5 feet here, and this, because of the factor, becomes 15 feet. Again, I would recommend, if you're doing it for the first time, take the ratio. The ratio can be taken in this way: 1 inch over 3.5 inch. And see how I'll write the 3 feet across the 1, because that's what the question's asking me. 3 across x feet. And I can just cross multiply. Cross multiplication is very important in proportions. And I'll get x is equal to 3.5 times 3, or 10.5. That's how I'm getting the 10.5 feet back up here. Right, let me just change the color a little bit so that it's easier to see. So now at this point, we already know what our two sides are. And finally, the area would just become 10.5 times 15 feet. And that would end up being the 100. And so if we were finding the answer in terms of feet square, the answer would become 157.5 feet squared. Remember all the ratios, like for example 1 over 2, the ratio can be written as decimals, or it can also be written as a percentage. We'll talk a little bit more about percentages in our next lesson. So I'll just give one more last example here of how we're going to use ratios and proportions. So let's just say this time we're talking about a map, and in the map they're telling us that 1 mile is 1.6 kilometers. Now, in reality, let's just say the distance between um, two countries is 1060 kilometers. Then how much is that in miles? So all we need to do is, we have the miles conversion into kilometers. I'll form a proportion. Again, make sure that the same numbers are across each other in the equal to sign. Like 1 mile is 1.6 kilometers, so you put them across each other in the equal to sign. And finally, the question says that how much is 1060 kilometers in terms of miles? And that's what I'm trying to find. So you need to be able to set up your proportions by using the information that's given to you in the question. Again, cross multiplication here. One more thing you would notice here is I try to keep the same unit across the same side of the equal to sign. And finally, now, in order to find the x, all I need to do is cross multiply. X goes to the top, 1060 goes to the top on the other side, and this 1.6 goes into the denominator. So it becomes 1060 divided by 1.6 equals x, and I'll get x is equal to 1,000 miles. Um, in this case, one thing that we need to remember, again, I had 1060 kilometers, actually. So when I divide 1060 by 1.6, the answer would be 662.5, not 1000. That was my mistake. There we go. So that's 662.5 miles. So just to conclude this lesson, the most important thing that you need to remember about ratios and proportions is how to set them. You'll most likely see word problems in the SAT. So you have to be able to set up your equation, and then at the end of it, you have to be able to cross multiply to solve the problems. That's what you'll see throughout all the questions that you face in the SAT. if you like the video, again, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions, please feel free to post it in the comments. Thank you again for watching.